Good morning, and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group, or catching this on your favorite podcast platform on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Dr. Eleanor Haspel-Portner, a 3-5 Splenic Manifestor, right angle cross of rulership in traditional human design terms. And you're going to find out that Dr. Eleanor doesn't really relate with that. And this has been a really interesting thing getting to know her. I had my world really shook when I discovered Dr. Eleanor in a YouTube video that she did with another human design person. And I have been now attending her weekly webinars and really going deep to understand this transformative way that she looks at human design, and now feel comfortable bringing this to you, because I'll be honest, I was a little confused by it all in the beginning. So I'm really excited to hear your story, how it started. I want to welcome you, and I want to hear how it started and then how we got to this amazing place of the 4 worlds. Thank you, Dr. Eleanor.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and glad to be sharing my story with everybody.
Great. So if you want to just go back to wherever you feel is a good starting point of how you started on this journey to discover these 4 worlds and how it relates to human design.
I think we all need to go back to our early roots, because if we think about our childhood and our consciousness during childhood, we are who we are, and that doesn't really change. So my first memory is actually of seeing auras, but I didn't know that until I was an adult and began having all kinds of experiences of consciousness. And so my first memory is of seeing auras, and I can now trace my whole childhood to what I was seeing and what I was knowing and what awarenesses I had, and I can put them in perspective. But of course, at the time, I was just living. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you were seeing auras as a young girl.
I started seeing, my first memory when I was still an infant is of seeing auras. And when I was I'm a psychologist by training, and I was involved with Freudian, the Psychoanalytic Institute in Chicago, as well as in training as a Jungian analyst. So as part of the training and part of the training as a psychologist, you have to be in your own analysis. And so when I was in my analysis and shared my first memory with my analyst, they didn't know what to make of it. And my first memory was of seeing auras and of responding. My father was holding me, and his aura shifted, and my mother's aura shifted, and I responded, and I started crying, and I was an infant. And I remember them looking for what was wrong with me, and they didn't get it, because it wasn't something wrong with me, it was something I was perceiving. And so for whatever, and I call it God's hand, I just didn't communicate what I was seeing overtly, but I never stopped seeing what I was seeing or knowing what I was knowing. So I knew, because of my psychic ability from infancy, and I did grow up in a psychic family. My oldest sister, who was 17 years older than me, was very psychic, precognitive experiences that always freaked her out. And my grandparents were psychic. My mother would often say, "Oh, I knew you were going to call." So, I was very open to the esoteric growing up. And I knew that in order to have any credibility, I needed a PhD. So I applied and got into the University of Chicago Committee on Human Development, which was the first integrative social science department in the world. It was psychology, sociology, biology, and anthropology. And those four disciplines are the four worlds. I didn't know it then. I didn't know it until recently that my whole education was the four worlds. But I went through, it was a very unique education. It was greats in the field of psychology, in all the fields. Kubler-Ross, Bruno Bettelheim, Carl Rogers, Tom Gordon, great people who were believing that the field of psychology was limited in believing that development stopped when we reached adulthood. And so my professors were all exploring cutting edge disciplines within their own field. And I was extremely blessed to be completely supported. They felt if the student had a problem, it was the fault of the faculty. So I took that kind of philosophy in my teaching. I taught college while I was in graduate school for 3 years. And then I got completely supported during graduate school. I did a study that was a study of Orthodox, conservative, and Reformed Jewish families, mainly because I was in New York for a couple of years and I needed to do my dissertation. So I picked Jewish families, Orthodox, conservative, and Reform. I looked at family interaction patterns, child rearing practices, the personality of the 13-year-old boy, and I interviewed 83 families in the total sample. And then I coded everything. I had over 295 variables in my dissertation. And I did statistical analyses that were never done before because one of my dissertation people was a statistician. So I say that because when I came to human design, Ra asked me to validate human design scientifically. And my background in statistics and in all of the disciplines made me the perfect person to do that, although I was not happy about doing it.
Okay, so I do want to get to that part, but I want to back up a little bit before we get to the human design part, because I think the part that got you to human design is really fast.
I'll get there.
What I know. Okay.
I'll go back. Yeah, I sort of move around. I'm not linear.
That's okay.
But so I did my dissertation and I finished it. While I was doing my dissertation, I had 2 children. My children are 11 months apart by design. And so I was teaching, doing my dissertation, having my children, and I loved my life, and I loved my work, but I didn't want to teach. I felt that I wanted, because my children were so young, and I was already well-versed in child development and psychology, and I didn't know what to do when they had tantrums. I didn't know what to do when they challenged me with things. So I went and studied parent effectiveness training and became the lead trainer in Chicago for organizations. And with parent effectiveness training, I felt like, oh, I have skills that can really help people and change their life. So I went and did a postdoc clinical internship at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital. And I took training with Masters and Johnson as a sex therapist. And I got trained by Erica Fromm-Reichman at University of Chicago in hypnosis. So I had all of these skills and got licensed and opened a private practice. I didn't know that people didn't do that.
Right? Because this was a while ago.
I started my practice in 1974. And I divorced my first husband in June of 1973.
Wow.
Because we had different spiritual values.
And I just want for perspective for people to realize, wasn't it something like 1972 before a woman could even open her own bank account, right? Something like that. I mean, there were a lot of limitations. I'm just saying that.
I had no limitations on me.
Right. So
I felt no discrimination. I went and applied for a teaching job at a university when I was 7 months pregnant. I didn't look like I was 7 months pregnant. I gained 12 pounds when I was pregnant with my first child. I was very careful. But I got a full-time teaching job on my own terms, which was 2 days a week for preparations. I taught adult personality theory, and introductory psych. Anyhow, so I went into private practice and I was in training as a Jungian analyst, and my practice just grew. It just got very quickly very successful. And I was doing sex therapy, and in 1974, I started meditating, transcendental meditation. And within a few weeks of doing that, I had a direct experience of God. I was sitting and I was being really hard on myself. I was saying, of what am I afraid? Because I was anxious. And it was evening, and I was just, of what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? What, like a mantra. And suddenly this light appeared, and it was God. This light came at me, and I was shown reincarnation, religion, relationships, all knowledge, everything. And I was just in awe. I was just taken over by this light. And when I came out of it, I wrote an outline for a book on divorce called Marriage in Trouble, A Time of Decision. It's out of print now. I got a contract back in the mail. So I wrote a book. And then I began to have increasing psychic abilities to the point that it was overwhelming. I had multiple. Between 1974 and 1978, I probably had a dozen Kundalini experiences. I knew nothing about energy, nothing about Kundalini. My Jungian analyst said, I think you need to read a book about Kundalini. I said, okay, what's that? Mm-hmm. So I was a novice. I knew nothing. But as I began realizing that I knew things about my patients that they hadn't told me, and I could see their energy, and I could see if what they were telling me was aligned with them, I needed to learn how to control it, because I knew too much about people, and it was intrusive. Not just intrusive in terms of I need permission to look, but also overwhelming for me. I didn't want to know when somebody was going to die or when somebody was going to have a bad experience. So I studied with the psychic for 5 years to learn how to control it. And in 1973, I also met my mentor astrologer, Catherine DeJersey. And I had been told that astrology was the most scientific of the esoteric disciplines. So I started studying astrology. It was the hardest thing I ever studied. Remember, in 1973, I started studying astrology in 1971. I met Katie in 1973. And I knew how to do a chart by hand because there was no astrology program.
Right.
So I'm an old-time astrologer, not just the computer astrologer.
Right.
And all of that is background for what happened when I saw the mandala of the human design.
And how did that come about?
1996. At that point, I was still in private practice. I had done groups with 30 people every 6 weeks for about 10 years. 1976, I went out to a Jungian conference in Malibu. And as I hit the coast highway, I started crying. And the words were, "This is home." I took my kids and I moved. I left my practice. I had a 6-month waiting list. I left my practice in Chicago, uprooted, came out to California and started over because God told me to do it. Then in 1970, so I moved in 77, 1978, I went to India because a voice said to me, "Go to the ashram." What ashram? Osho. Who's Osho? I went. I met Marvin at the day and time that Catherine DeJersey said I would meet someone who would be significant in my life. Marvin and I have been together since the day we met. He came to my room for a shower. I was at the 5-star hotel. He was at an Indian hotel, Coldwater. So he was looking he was cold. He came and shared my blanket. We went and had coffee. He was looking for someone who had hot water so he could take a shower. And I said, "You're welcome to come to my room." He came to my room. He never left.
How many years ago was that?
That was 1978, 46 years ago.
Yeah.
And he had left his medical practice. We knew all the same people. We lived a mile from each other in Pacific Palisades, California, and we had never met.
Wow.
So he had left his medical practice because he wanted to be holistic and he did not want to do herd medicine, where he could stay with somebody for 15 minutes.
Oh, and now you can't even stay that long.
Well, now he still practices. I insisted that he work in our pool house in our home office. I worked at home in California because I wanted people to see that I'm authentic, that I live the way I tell people they can live, that I don't just speak it, I live it. And that was important to me. It was important to me that my clients know my kids, know my family, know where I lived, and that they could see that I was for real. And so I was, doing my practice. I was working in the movie business, consulting on shows and with talent. And then in 1996, in the Mountain Astrologer magazine, I saw the image of the mandala. And there was a phone number, of course, Zeno and Chaitanya. And I called, and Chaitanya picked up the phone. And it just so happened that Zeno was in California that weekend teaching.
Wow.
And so I said, well, the class is over. Would she do a private class for me. So she did. So I spent a few days with Zeno in my home, learning human design. And at that point, we had no computer program. I had to color my own design. And I remember for Thanksgiving that year, so that was in March 16th, 1996. The following Thanksgiving, I hand drew everybody's human design chart, laminated it, and gave it to 20 people at my Thanksgiving dinner. So I was very interested. I attended the first class that Ra taught on, I think it was channels and circuits. And I didn't know that attending the class meant that I had asked Zeno, do I need to memorize anything? Do I need to study anything? No, just come. And then, of course, there was an exam to get certified. So I stayed in Taos and I got certified as a human design analyst. And I got very excited about integrating all of the fields I already knew. Mm-hmm. I had already been a student of the Tree of Life. I completed a 20-year study on the Tree of Life, in fact, through the builders of the Adytum. So I know Tarot, I know the Tree of Life, I know the paths of intelligence on the Tree of Life.
Can you back up? Because you said something I'd never heard before when you said the Tree of Life. You said the builders of the
Adytum, BOTA.org. It's a organization that is a correspondence school, home study on the Tree of Life.
Oh, okay.
And it takes about 15 to 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Less than a week. So and what I did and what I do, I traditionally through the years have asked my children and my husband and their families as a Mother's Day gift or a birthday gift to do something. So one year I asked them to do the Sedona method. One particular year I said, I just started doing the builders of the Adytum and I've only done 6 weeks. Would you do 6 weeks as a birthday gift to me or a Mother's Day gift to me? And if you like it, continue. And if you don't want to, 6 weeks is my birthday gift or my Mother's Day gift. So they did it.
So them actually taking the course, not gifting you a future course.
No. So my husband and my 2 children, Charles and Diane, and myself, finished all 20 years of the builders of the Adytum. And we did it staying in sync with each other. So if one of us got lazy, the other one said, let's move. Where's the next lesson? And we helped each other. So by the time I got to human design, I already knew the Tree of Life. I had already studied the Tree of Life in my Jungian analysis because Jung believed that the paths of intelligence in the Tree of Life were the process of individuation. And that is true. As you move up the wheel, up the tree, mm-hmm. Your consciousness evolves and becomes fuller and richer and more integrated. So when I saw the mandala, I knew what it was, and I was way more educated in all of the disciplines than most of the people. Anyhow, when I went to Taos in May of 97, Ra was teaching the first class on profile. And he did that because he was writing a book. I had put him in touch with a book publisher who was a friend of mine. And he was doing a spec book. It didn't get picked up by the publisher, but it was the book on profile. And I invited him to come visit California to stay at our home. And I said, we can fill your schedule. So we did. He came, he stayed in our home for 2 or 3 weeks. And told us a lot of personal stuff, including that he was a scam artist before he got to design. Literally, he sold things to people that didn't exist. But we liked Ra, we were friends, and we filled his schedule. I mean, he was seeing 5 people a day, all cash. And he loved being there because we filled his schedule. Mm-hmm. So that was September. I went to Taos in October for a class on centers. And I was already teaching design to my clients. And I had a Friday meeting every week, and I was doing transits and studying it. And they didn't want me to do it because I was charging more than Zeno could charge for a reading. And Rod didn't have the balls to say to Zeno, she's a professional, you're not. She needs to charge her fee. He said, basically, you can't do this. So I stopped and I pulled out and I said, I'm done. Ra was scheduled to come back in February 1998. And my grandson was born prematurely the week he came. Mm. And Zeno didn't want him staying at my home. She wanted him at a hotel. And I sent somebody. They were not generous of heart and didn't do business the way I did business. And I couldn't do business that way. So I didn't send anybody to Ra that trip. I was done. I was out of it. And Tom Pfeiffer, who was a friend of mine from my first human design class, bootlegged Ra's recordings for me. And after every lecture Ra did, he would send me audios. And nobody knew. And then in 1999, I got a phone call from Chetan asking me if I would, saying Ra was destitute. He had broken with Zeno and Chaitanya. And Jiva was born prematurely, very serious premature.
Raz, right? That's Ra's. What? That was Ra's other son?
Second son.
Yes.
Jiva. And it bankrupted him. Mm-hmm. So he needed to make money to get back to Ibiza. And Marvin and I really wanted nothing more to do with human design because there was no integrity in the way it was being handled. And so we were asked if Ra could come stay with us and we would fill his schedule so he could earn money to go back to Ibiza. And I said, let me speak to Marvin and I'll call you back. And we decided that even though Ra was a scoundrel and had not treated us right, that the messenger was imperfect, but the message was an important message for humanity. And so we agreed to it. And Ra's question was, could he come with his children and Ambuja? And we said yes. He arrived without Ambuja and his kids. Marianne Winokur bought him a house or gave him a house, I don't know, in Sedona. So Ra arrived, and within a week of arriving, said he would like Marvin and me to be legal partners of his, and we would be equal partners, 50-50, and we would be the professional arm of human design. And he asked if we would validate it scientifically. I said no. He said, I'll sit with you for however long it takes and tell you everything the voice told me. And you will have rights to everything. And that will be in a legal contract. And I said no. Marvin said yes. Marvin's a double-boarded MD. He's boarded in internal medicine and immunology allergy. So Ra, at one point, Ra was sitting out in my yard, and I said to him, Ra, why did you choose us? He said, I didn't. I had no choice. So, so Marvin said, yes, let's do it. So I said, okay. And I did it. I enlisted my son's help, Eric Memmert, who did the program, and we coded everything. And I hired a consultant statistician to make sure that everything I was doing with the statistical package for the social sciences was right. And so I did statistics, everything. I did every variable in the human design chart was coded. Every gate. What?
I've heard you talk about this, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around what that really meant. So like if you, like, for example, you're coding for, what does that mean?
The human design chart is based on astrology.
Right.
So we use the astrological calculations of every component of the human design system to code the charts. So I had 30,000, a sample of 30,000 people in multiple groups, and I exported them from neutrinos into Jigsaw astrologically, used the coding of the human design calculations the way they were done, and then did all of the statistical analysis and then exported them back into neutrinos. So it was a very complex way of working with the data. You had to be really a statistician and understand.
Yeah, because I still don't understand it, and I've heard you explain it a few times.
Because, I ran factor analyses, I ran chi-squares, I ran z-tests, I ran t-tests. I did everything I knew as a social scientist who had been mentored by a statistician to code data and to analyze it. And all of the samples were matched samples using A+ astrological data. And personal samples, 100 fibromyalgia patients from Marvin's practice, paired with a normal population. Addiction patients from Randy Richmond's addiction clinic. Heart attack patients, AIDS patients, So anyhow, what I found was rather disappointing. The only thing that held was the structure of the body graph and type. Profile is an artifact. Tones, colors, and bases had no statistical significance whatsoever. And the sad part about it is that I had all of this output, huge output. And when Ra would visit, I'd show him the output and I say, Ra, it's not here. Where is it? He'd say, look here. So I'd go and I'd redo it. And I'd look there and it's not there. There are things in the output that I could not interpret that are important. So we need other people to do the science of human design. Human design itself does not hold up. In circuitry, no circuitry. Channels, yes, you could see the link, but it didn't connect. So what Ra said about circuitry, it makes sense from a common sense standpoint. It's a good story, but it's not statistically valid. So when I got the statistics, and then Ra and I were teaching and we were doing classes, et cetera, he wanted me to release data that I could not release because it was being misused. And I was a research associate at University of Chicago when I was a graduate student. I watched them fudge data.
Mm-hmm.
They fudged the Head Start data, and then Larry Kohlberg, who was the moral development person, fudged his data. And he was outed for fudging his data. So I have a lot of integrity when it comes to the science. And my agreement with Ra was that I would not be involved in human design, that human design that he was teaching was for the general public, and he was dumbing it down, in his words, to a 4th grade level. And as he said to me, "You're not good at dumbing things down." Thank you, Ra. I'm not. Mm-hmm. I can't. So it was very clear to me that the human design community was separate from the science. And I broke with Ra. He got very angry at me when I had Eric do the calculations for what I called at the time the triple design matrix. Now, we did teach a class about it. And Ra did say, we have to thank Eleanor for showing us that unless you use the multiple matrices, you do not see the full expression of what the different worlds give in human design. He literally said that.
And that was when you had 3.
Yes.
So
what I did was when let's call it the guts of the human design system didn't hold up statistically, I wanted, the Bodygraph did hold up. Mm-hmm. It had integrity from the factor analyses of the centers. So I knew that the Bodygraph and type were real. So I wanted to see if type in the dream design would hold, and it did. But I needed to find the sleep design of a mammal. Ra only had the dream design of a mammal, not the sleep design of a mammal. And he didn't understand the sleep architecture. Remember, Ra was not a psychologist or a social scientist of any kind. Mm-hmm. So I taught the class on the dream design. He didn't know what to make of it. I taught the first dream design class in November of 1999. I taught the second dream class in Sedona over a 2-day period, I believe. I'm editing that book. I wrote 13 books with Ra. They'll all be published. I was editing and doing commentaries about what held and what didn't. And then I had to stop because I had to finish my own book. So anyhow, so I tried to relate to the human design community in 2002, I think, or 3. And they really didn't want me in that community. Ra did not want me speaking the truth. So we broke. He was not paying his bills. He was not honoring our contract. So I dissolved the partnership. I own all the rights. I own all the copyrights because I was the only one who copyrighted anything. Mm-hmm. So I own the Bodygraph in its true form, which is sacred geometry. The voice spent 5 days of the 7 days with Ra getting the measurements of the Bodygraph exact.
And someone just asked this in a social media post somewhere, so I just want to clarify. The voice told Ra where to put all the gates inside the centers, right? Did that all come from the voice?
Okay. The Bodygraph that I use is the real Bodygraph. The Bodygraph in Eric Memmert's program is the real Bodygraph. It is the one that I copyrighted and the one that the voice gave him.
Isn't that the one Chetan uses also?
I don't know.
I thought I remembered you saying that.
I gave Chetan and Karen Curry permission to use the Bodygraph.
Okay.
When they published their books, the publishers wanted to know who owned the Bodygraph, and it was me, and I gave them permission.
Yeah, that's the way she used to do it. She has a different Bodygraph now with.
I know, and it's terrible. I mean,
I'm not a fan of the heart in the center. I understand the reason she did it, but because the love gates are on the identity center, but I think it just it's confusing.
It's not I'm a purist. The voice gave Ra a system. Mm-hmm. I did the science on the system. The system is a phenomenal system. And I realized now, fast forward, Eric helped me get the calculations. I validated them. I've used them for 25 years. I've done a lot of work. I've been on the internet. I was invisible, except in my small group. And I had my practice in my life. I didn't need design. Mm-hmm. When we moved from California to Mount Pleasant, South Carolina in 2021, because California was unsafe. And Marvin had open heart surgery October 2022. And we had already gotten certified as Tai Chi Gong teachers. So we do the figure eights, mental to physical, spiritual to emotional. And it's an exercise. So at one point, Marvin said, there's a negative force around me. What can you do? So I said, I'm going to put on a Jim Gore prayer, and I'm going to do figure eights at your bedside. We'll get rid of this. So he lay down, and I start doing figure eights and playing this prayer for him. And the voice said to me, your layout of charts is the 4 worlds. It's the figure 8. You know what you have. You know how to read it. Now is the time. Go public. Okay. What do I do? So a week later, I'm doing my Tai Chi Gong again, and the voice says, go public. So I went into my Tai Chi Gong class group, and I said, here's what just happened to me. And 10 people wanted readings. And I realized what I had. It's the 4 worlds and my real work. And then I realized, my work at university was the 4 worlds.
Yeah.
Anthropology, sociology, psychology, biology, 4 worlds. So I started teaching it. And it's gotten very big.
Yeah.
And the real work for me is not human design. It's not, I mean, the charts and the calculations I got that delineated the charts and delineated critical periods in human development and show that, well, the pediatric literature has said for a long time that the first 3 months of life are the missing fourth trimester. And a baby developmentally does not have volition until 3 months of age. They don't reach for objects. So I knew that. I knew my charts had psychological and biological validity. But that validity gives validity to the theory of personality of the four worlds. And what I've realized as a psychologist, social scientist, theoretician is that the four worlds are what we need to embrace as humans. And that the human design, while it's a brilliant beginning, is not the complete picture.
Yeah. So for those who, have never heard of any of this and have not been exposed, I did put a link pinned in this, and it will be in the show notes where you can get your chart and see it. But so the traditional human design chart is just one world.
It's the mental world.
And it's the mental world. And I'll be just to derail for a second. When I first heard all of this, I had a lot of discomfort because I was like, okay, I'm a human design mentor, and now I'm listening to this woman who's telling me how she took all these things and now is saying these aren't real science and all, and there's all this more. And now am I doing people a disservice by continuing to teach this? So it took me some time of listening to what you had to say in your webinars, reading different things, reading my charts, and really waiting until I had clarity. So the way that where I'm at now, and I don't in any way claim that I really even understand a decent portion of what you're have to teach, but I see it as the mental world is where we're all living right now until we awaken and really live as fully integrated humans. So many people who are coming to human design need to come through that mental world portal. And so what I'm doing with people is not a disservice, it's just an entry point. And so as I teach them, I've noticed that I have a tendency to, as people get to understand things, like kind of take away all the labels and, really this idea that we all have all of the chart, right? We just have it either open or defined. And so using that, I'm able to really help people to see all of the messages that are in there in the chart. And I don't think you're saying that those messages aren't still in there. They're just not working in the way that it's been hammered into us.
Well, when you say to somebody, and for example, I'm doing a webinar on Tuesday for the Bodygraph people on abundance. And so I looked at Warren Buffett, Steve Forbes, and Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is that in their mental world, you would not see the abundance. You can, when you put the worlds together, wow. But when you just use the mental world, the world of reality, of the waking world, it's not who we are. It's how we can manifest, maybe. But in my human design, I'm a manifestor. But I kept saying to her, I'm not a manifestor. Where is it that I wait? And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. And then all of a sudden I know, and I take action. Like I did for 24 years,
right.
Waiting and waiting. And then the voice says, go.
Right.
And I'm a lunar generator. And when I saw the 8 charts, when I got the calculations in 2000 or 2001, and I laid out these 8 charts, and I went, holy shit, this explains it. It explained my kids to me. It explained my husband to me. It explained me to me in a way human design did not.
Yeah.
So I think if the human design community would open up to looking at the flow of energy in a body graph rather than labels, it would be so much more empowering for their clients.
Yeah.
To say to someone, you're a projector and you have to be invited and recognized has derailed so many people. And I've gotten people come to me who have been damaged by being labeled. And, just for disclosure, even though I'm a psychologist, I've never wanted to use the DSM because I don't label people.
Right.
So, yes, if I needed to bill insurance, I would say to somebody, is it okay with you if I put down generalized anxiety? It's not a big label.
Right.
But, think about what would happen if somebody's labeled a borderline or an inadequate personality or a projector, or you're a reflector, you have no defined anything. It's not as empowering as I like to be.
Yeah.
So for the human design listeners, open your mind up to the possibility that you're more than just one design.
Yeah.
That you're multiple designs, and see where they take you. It's beautiful when you begin to look at the timing that the charts show, at how we flow and how decisions get made, and when you know what you know because you know it. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. I have another question. I know you use Chiron to give definition in the chart, and that makes a definite difference in people, even in their mental world chart.
Right.
You use that there. And I'm wondering how, because most people I know look at Chiron for sure, but they say it doesn't give definition. So where did that come from?
As an astrologer,
Mm-hmm.
one of the astrology systems I studied was the Magi astrology. And the Magi astrology system makes a huge, huge point of the importance of Chiron in a chart. In fact, they consider it the key element in a chart. And what I see is that Chiron points to somebody's life purpose and where they have healing capacity. People who study human design are generally more conscious and awake than the general population. Therefore, Chiron was discovered before the 1900s. It was acknowledged big time in 1977. That means anybody born in the 20th century was impacted by Chiron. Therefore, it's like we use Pluto or Neptune in all of the astrology charts. But the ancient astrologers, before they were discovered, didn't use it.
Right.
So
go ahead.
I think it's a very important planetary body. And I use it.
So, but the voice didn't tell Ra to use Chiron, correct? That was something you added.
The voice didn't give Ra a lot of information about the body graph. Things like type, things like profile, things like circuits, those were all made up by Ra. They were not given by the voice. The voice spent 5 days giving Ra the proportions of the body graph. And Ra told me, because I asked him a question, I said, when we sleep, we go horizontal. So the hexagrams, when we're vertical, the energy is coming through the opening. When we go like this, the hexagram changes. The way the energy is coming into the body. Did the voice tell you that? He said, when I asked him that, he said, the voice spent 5 days giving him all of the proportions, and they had to be exact. And he said he had to keep tearing it up until he got it right. Mm-hmm. So, given that, the voice didn't give Ra a lot of information. And he told Marvin and me, quote, everything the voice told him.
Yeah.
It did not give him any of that.
But did it tell him the planetary bodies to use and like the idea of, so all this stuff where like Ra tells us, that we use the nodes, but for example, we don't use the midheaven or the ascending, even though those are also points in space. So did the voice tell him which planetary?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have to go back. I don't think so.
Huh.
I think it did tell him to use the nodes. It didn't give him a lot of information. The voice was primarily giving him the body graph.
Yeah.
And it was after he had the body graph that he and Jurgen, possibly Martin, Zeno and Chaitanya all came up with type. When Ra was in with Zeno and Chaitanya is when they came up with type. And he talks about that. Chaitanya talked about that recently. Mm-hmm. That Ra really had nothing except the body graph.
Interesting.
And Ra was not always open-minded.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk for forever. I mean, I feel like we haven't even touched the surface of talking about the 4 worlds or anything, but I know that that is available for people. You've written.
I'm going to be doing a 5-day experience on the 4 worlds to give people a taste of it free.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Starting August 12th.
Okay.
And it's on a private Facebook group under Noble Energy Wellness.
Right. I think you have to sign up for the program before you can get into that group,
yes,
right?
Probably.
Okay. So if people want to work with you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
They can go to nobleenergywellness.com, or they can email me at ehp@noble sciences.com.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, and I'll have the links in the show notes and in the Facebook group comments. I also know you have a wonderful new chart generator that shows all your 8 actual charts and the integrated chart. And we didn't even touch on the fact that, the majority, like
95% of the population are in their integrated manifesting generators. So what I say to people is, by the time you're 3 months old, you have everything you need to be manifesting your full potential. And God designed us that way.
Right.
So limitation is not part of the plan.
Yeah.
And I'm more than happy to come back another time and talk about the 4 worlds if you want me to do that.
Yeah, that would probably be something that people would definitely want to hear about. And I know you've got a lot of other webinars that you're doing right now as well. So, and you're going to be doing the virtual, did you say at the H.D.
In Santa Fe, I'm going to be doing 4 lectures virtually. the altitude is not safe for my husband and me.
Yeah. Okay. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I would love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I also invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free human design chart and find all the ways to connect with me directly. And don't forget to please follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And please take a moment and give me a 5-star review. That helps so much. Thanks so much, Eleanor. I've really enjoyed our chat today.
And thank you. It's been great to be here with you.
Peace out, everybody.